I have the paid version of Google Meet, so there's no time limit or anything.
Oh, that works.
Nice.
I'll try
Okay.
to shut up as much as possible.
So, is it the case that he or you is more familiar with typology?
Him, for sure.
She
Okay.
gets all my info.
Yeah, he like spouts it to me.
He likes to talk to you about typological things.
Oh, yeah.
She was the problem that I was solving
Yeah.
with personality.
Okay.
Yeah.
When you, well, let me ask you some of the initial SI questions I did him. So, can you tell
Okay.
me about your order of events that you did yesterday? Like, I got up, I'm mad.
I got up. I think it was our sleep schedule's a little off, so I think got up around like 3:08 maybe, and then like PM because our schedule is like really messed up. We're fixing it right now. But we got up around then, and then went and I was writing notes on Shopify because he has a bunch of notes on his Google Sheets page because I'm working with him and doing that whole thing. So I was writing a bunch of notes on Shopify, and then I went and after, I don't know how long it was, but then after that I took a break and I did some process some returns and stuff from last week, and then I went back to writing notes on Shopify.
What did you do on your break?
Honestly, we kind of like, well, sometimes we just kind of stop and like start talking about typology, and then we kind of go on like kind of just like keep going, and that's usually what I like to do. Like when we're on a break or something, is like we'll talk about either like typology or we'll talk about the show or something that like, because like I'm the Cowboy Bebop show that just like came out, the one on Netflix. I hadn't seen the original one, and so I was asking him about it, and so that's where like on our breaks we usually kinds of things, and I usually like interacting with him.
Is
but
the
then,
new one live action?
Yeah, it is.
It is?
Yeah.
I'm very wary of live action renditions of anime.
Yeah.
It's not good.
Okay, so
I'll plan out her whole day usually since we've been together.
What I'm asking about for the break is, did you have any kind of SI thing, like smoke a cigarette, drink a drink, eat some food, go pee, something like that?
Probably bathroom, I guess, yeah. But I mean, I wouldn't consider that a break. I mean, I guess I'd consider a break something that'll probably last like 15 minutes or so at least, I guess.
Okay. Let's say that Bob and Joe are always arguing with each other.
Okay.
About what to listen to on the radio. They have to share a vehicle fairly often.
Okay.
And they get in really angry arguments about whether a given song is good or not.
Okay.
So, explain to me, what do you think the source of the conflict here is? You're going to sort of psychoanalyze the situation, be a relationship counselor, the divorce therapist for Bob and Joe, but they're just friends. But about diagnose what's going on here. What's really going on here?
I think what it is there's probably some kind of problem with one of, like, they're both probably feeling like they're not understood by the other one. I don't think it's about the music. I think it's more so about, like, when they go in, like talking to each other, the music is just, like, an outlet for their aggression that they feel towards each other, I think. So I think what it is it's more along the lines of, like, they are using the music, and that's kind of like the last straw kind of a thing, to where they tip over and then they end up going and like getting into a fight about it. I don't think it's the music per se. I think it's other things that they haven't talked about and worked out in like conflict with each other is what I think that it is.
Okay. I can recall a specific occasion that when I learned a lesson, and the lesson was always or never leave cereal bowl without rinsing out the leftover cereal, or it sticks too much to the side of the bowl. Okay. And the occasion was I was sometime a teenager, and I had left a cereal bowl like this, and I walked in the kitchen, and my dad, I hit the timing of it so that he discovered the bowl as I walked in, and I basically got this, "I'm not your little bitch. You know how hard it is to get this shit off?" And I got that speech, right? And after that, I always remembered when I have cereal, rinse out the bowl because it's really hard to scrub the cereal off the sides.
Yeah.
Can you relate an equivalent experience that you learned a lesson from a very specific instance like that?
I definitely have the same kind of stories that like you have, I guess, because I'm a little bit more disorganized, I'd say. So I kind of have like similar stories, like in regards to like cleaning or cleanliness. I definitely have that, but I can't think of a specific story right now.
Okay. How about another kind of specific story?
Okay.
A specific story of a time when you realized sometimes it's just better to keep my mouth shut.
Yeah, I've done that in high school when I went and I had a feeling because I told there was a girl who had a locker next to me. She was my friend at the time. Her name was Lily, and she had just broken up with her boyfriend, but I knew that she was going to be getting with this other guy named Devin, and I told her, I was like, Lily, like, you shouldn't be so upset. Like, it's okay because you're going to get with Devin probably within a month or so, like, it'll be fine. And she was like, oh my God, I can't believe you said that, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, going on like a whole thing, and I was like, well, I probably should not have said that and should have just like kept my mouth shut and just let things happen. They're married now, but like.
You were right.
I was right, yeah.
And I was worried.
Within 2 weeks.
I was worried at the beginning of this story because Devin sounded like a scoundrel, but it turns out he was a fine guy. Okay, so that's a nicely specific story, and that's exactly what I asked for. Is what you gave me is a nice specific instance. So, in fact, it's a specific conversation. So, that's indicative that you're not SI polar. Okay, I'm not going to make any larger conclusions from that, but you can do what he cannot do.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. So okay. So that's the start spot with SI. Let's try some NE questions that I didn't really bother to ask him.
Okay.
The first one is called my invention naming question. So I've got a new invention, but I'm bad at coming up with names that the marketing department thinks will sell. So I'd like you to help me by naming my new invention. Give me multiple possible snappy names for it. And the invention is this. It's a coffee table that has a flare gun built in so that if you abruptly find yourself, say, lost in the forest with your coffee table, you can shoot up a flare and get help.
Okay.
All I can think of as a name is coffee table with a flare gun in it. And they say that's not snappy enough.
You can have like home brewed. The steam machine. I don't.
Okay.
Like coffee's a better.
That's better.
It's a coffee table with a flare gun. Let that extrovert intuition run wild.
Okay. Coffee table with a flare gun. I'm like drawing a blank.
Bear-free coffee.
Bear-free coffee?
Bear-free. Because then you're not going to get hunted down by bears.
I don't know.
It's never good at ideas.
No.
How about emergency rescue table?
Oh, it's a table? I thought it was a coffee machine.
No, it's a coffee table. It's a coffee table.
I thought you were like, oh, you're bringing this coffee machine.
No. A coffee table.
On the side of...
Now, there's a coffee table with a flare gun built into it. So it's got kind of a thick top. You can't see the flare gun, but there's just a button you push and it shoots off with the flare. You can load it with red, yellow, green, or blue flares.
That's Star Wars.
Star Wars? That's not a terrible name for it. I think it's taken as a brand name, but go ahead.
Yeah, maybe, yeah.
Anything else?
No.
I think you should load it with fireworks.
Ooh, with fireworks. It's funny.
4 legs, 1 gun. Okay. So, all right, let me ask you another kind of extroverted intuition question.
Okay.
Have you ever heard me ask an Inky Pinky or ever heard of an Inky Pinky question before?
We watched like kind of a video that you had and then you were doing a few of them.
Okay, so I'll try to come up with some new ones then.
Okay.
This is a a persistent problem bothering male parents. And it's an inky pinky. A persistent problem affecting male parents. Do you know what it is? I don't know, Peter.
It's something that's got a rhyme with syllables. Is that?
Yeah,
is
it's
that what
two syllables and they
I
rhyme.
think it was like issue.
I'd have
something.
to know what syllables mean, and I skipped English class.
It's a father bother.
Oh, I don't think
I'm just starting to come up with a bunch of things like that are probably shouldn't be said if you're going to publish the video at all. So I'm just not going to say them.
Okay.
But I came up with a lot of those kind of things and a lot of things about the kids and all of those.
All right.
But I'm not really good at syllables.
How about this? Inky Pinky is 2 syllables each, and it's a...
What's a syllable?
A syllable is like, my name Eric has 2 syllables. Eric.
Yep.
Okay.
Like that.
Kyla. It's 2 syllables.
That makes sense.
I
didn't go to English class.
Okay, so
To the beach.
so this is a 2 syllables each, and it's a safe haven for trees.
Something forced.
Kind of a hard one, actually. But it's a good one.
These make me feel dumb.
It's an arbor harbor.
Oh.
I was thinking something like National Park. I can come up with
I thought
those,
it was
but
like
I'm really
forest,
bad.
but I'm
I'm really
thinking
bad
something
with when it comes to syllables or rhyming things.
Okay, so can you make one up then? Now, can you say, think of 2 words that rhyme, and then give me a clue? The example ones I usually give are, hilltop water spout, inky pinky, mountain fountain is the answer. Or roadway flesh, ink pink, street meat is the answer. So when I come up with them, first I think of 2 words that rhyme, and then I come up with a clue. Can you do that?
I can come up with one that rhymes, but I can't come up with what I would say beforehand.
Okay, so what's the things that rhyme? What is it?
Well, I was thinking of like phone home, like from ET, but I couldn't think of the 2 words that I can put in there. Like ET saying, I guess.
Home doesn't rhyme with phone.
Oh, you're right. I'm dumb.
Bone.
Phone
Yeah,
bone.
I'm dumb.
So if you were gonna say,
I'm so dumb.
That'd be like
if you were gonna say phone bone, you'd say like
Phone bone, it'd be like-
to call your skeleton. Call skeleton. And it's an ink pink, and the answer would be phone bone.
These make me feel so stupid.
Don't feel stupid. This is not, listen, there's no intelligence in here. Attentional manners.
I feel like it's gonna be super obvious to all these other people, and they're like, "Wow, she's fucking."
No, well, here's the deal. Attentional manners are
good. That's all that matters.
explaining how that everybody has attentional strengths and attentional, like non-habitual attentional manners. And for people who don't pay attention, for people who don't pay attention in certain ways habitually, if there are skills linked to those, then they're going to test badly. But the thing is, I have a blind spot that's blind that I'm terrible at. The thing is, though, my blind spot is introverted feelings, so it's not very visible. What cognitive functions reveals is how we've got society all screwed up so that some kinds of ways of paying attention that are more public or can be tested publicly are afforded certain statuses like smart or intuitive or whatever that people think are desirable. But, the kind of way that I can't pay attention is just as significant as every other way of paying attention. It's just some of them are less testable. It's harder to test F5 polar, for example. So, okay, let me figure out how you are with the introverted thinking. So I just did extroverted intuition. I'm going to do introverted thinking next. Can you tell me who my mother's husband is in relation to me?
Your mother's husband would be your grandfather.
Okay. And how about my father's sister's son's sister in relation to me?
Your father's sister, so that's your aunt's son, would be your cousin. And then I didn't hear the last part was
sister.
What? Sister, so that would also be your cousin.
Okay, right. Okay, good. Now let me try some Let me try a syllogism one.
You know what better than I do.
If some pigs enjoy basketball and some basketball enjoyers also enjoy hockey, is it necessarily the case that some pigs enjoy hockey?
Yeah.
No.
If some pigs enjoy basketball and some things that enjoy basketball also enjoy hockey, then some things that enjoy basketball also enjoy hockey.
Well, that would be the case that if that were the case, then it would be the case that if some people who go to the bathroom go to the women's room, and some people who go to the women's room use feminine napkins, then some men use feminine napkins, which isn't the case. Because some people go to the women's restroom and some people go to the men's restroom, doesn't mean that the people, and just because only some of the people who go to the women's restroom use things in the women's restroom.
I guess say that men that use feminine napkins could be considered transgender.
Well, you could, but if they didn't use them in the bathroom, it wouldn't be relevant to this question. All right, let me ask you another TI question real quick. All right, let me ask you a different kind of TI question. Speaking of this transgender thing, let me ask you this. So there's this, it's a true story. In England, there was this hen, and it had one of its ovaries damaged, and it was in a flock of other hens. After it had its ovary damaged, it started to grow feathers like a rooster. It started to cock-a-doodle-doo like a rooster. And it would even, when hawks came around, it would stand up and scare away the hawk and tell the hens to go hide. And it would even pick out special worms and treats for its favorite hens, just like a rooster. So the question is, was that a hen or a rooster?
It was a hen, but what probably happened is that it started, since it lost the ovaries, it wasn't producing enough estrogen. So then it had more of an overproduction of testosterone, as it probably happened. So then it presumed more masculine tendencies in that subspecies.
You're overdoing the question.
It was a hen with big dick energy, is what you're saying.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. So the thing is, what I'm looking for with that question, first of all, is whether or not a person gives me an answer. So INTPs, INFPs will typically say, well, I guess it just depends on your frame of reference. If you want to evaluate it as a matter of identity, you might say it's a rooster, but if you want to evaluate it in terms of biology, you might say it's a hen, and so there's not really any answer to it. People who have TI either second or third, for example, are much more likely to give a single answer. Second especially, TI second goes, you're asking the question because you expect me to take a clear and definitive position on the matter, so I will. Whereas INTPs instead would be more likely to not answer the question, for example. So just sort of keeping you abreast of where I'm going with what I'm asking. Okay. So the next kind of question I'm going to ask is a TE question. Can you please break down the task of cleaning out your car into exactly 4 steps?
Is this assuming that all of the parts that I need, like all the vacuum and like all the cleaning supplies are already there, or is that step 1? Like, are they already set out?
It's entirely up to you. You get to decide which steps are necessary to include in this breakdown.
Okay. So, step 1 would be get the cleaning supplies. Step 2 would be take all of the stuff out of the car if there's anything that's still left in there. Step 3 would be using like the vacuum first, and then using the wet quote unquote cleaning supplies on the car. And then step 4 would be after you go and take those cleaning supplies out, because you have to put them in to clean the car. And then after you take them out, then you would wash the outside of the car.
I think that's 5 steps.
That was 4.
It was 4, but she combined in steps 3 and 4 2 steps each. So really it was kind of 6 steps but that's fine. But you enumerated 4 steps, so that's fine. Okay, so how much do you think a person's worth links to their utility?
Give the honest answer. Don't feel bad.
I want to evaluate.
She called her last boyfriend a whiny bitch.
I did.
Because he what?
Had emotions.
Because he was crying all the time, and I'm like, oh my god, he's such a whiny bitch.
Was he crying because his family had all just been slaughtered?
No, just for anything.
Yeah.
Legitimately anything. He would cry over like the stupidest, in my personal opinion, the stupidest things.
So give the honest
What's an example of crying over something stupid?
he dropped. Okay, so like let's just say he dropped his coffee and the coffee spilt on the floor. But it wasn't like it didn't get a stain anything. It wasn't like a big deal. You just clean up the coffee and you move on with your day. But he spilled the coffee onto the floor, and then he was like started crying because the coffee spilled on the floor. But there was no previous actions. Like it wasn't like it was a whole bunch of things that compiled onto each other. It was just like he was upset that the coffee spilled, and I was like, dude, what's their fucking problem? Make another coffee, clean up the spill, and keep going. Like, why are you crying?
Would he say things like, "It's just a really frustrating day. Okay, it's just things are really been hard lately."
Yeah, I was like, oh my god, I'm dating a woman. That's what it felt like.
You know what the classic FI woman statement is I was really hoping we could spend some time together tonight.
He wants to kill those people.
Yeah.
I can
really
handle them a lot better than she can. I actually go and read into people.
When I watched Corey, my friend, endure this repeatedly from his INFP wife, I just wanted to throttle the bitch. It's like, will you stop? Okay, well that's interesting. So, do people perceive you as more sympathetic or empathetic than you perceive yourself?
No. I think I perceive myself as more sympathetic, but other people perceive when I'm sympathetic as not genuine because I try overdoing it because I know I lack it. So like I think people generally would see me as more calloused, I guess, would probably be a good word. Or like, I got like...
If somebody calls you for help with something,
yeah.
Have they already tried and gotten no's from multiple other people first?
Like, do you mean they want emotional help or they want, like, problem-solving help?
Well, let's start with scenario one.
Okay.
I don't know what to do about Joe. I love him, but he comes home drunk and he draws a crayon on the wall.
Okay.
Or scenario number two is, I gotta move out of my apartment. You've got a Toyota Corolla. That's roomy. Can you help me move my stuff?
Okay. So I have to go and say how I'd interact with you.
Which are you more likely to be called? Who's more likely to call you? The lady talking about Joe or the lady talking about moving her stuff?
Probably the lady talking about Joe because I have a lot of friends who are more emotional.
Because you know women.
Because I help them. Because when they come to me and they never get what they want, so they get upset. So they come to me and they're like, oh my god, this is what happened with Joe, blah, blah, blah. And then I'm like, oh, I'm sorry to hear that. You should break up with Joe.
Yeah.
And then they get upset that they came to me in the first place, and I'm like, I'm sorry. Like, what did you want me to say?
Yeah, I'm always chiming in to make her not.
He usually has to temper me most of the time because I kind of am a bit abrasive.
Okay.
I guess.
What do you think's better advice? People just need to be more logical, or people just need to let go of their past.
Better advice?
Yeah, in general. Pretend you got world mic. You have to choose between those two options, though, in this particular instance of world mic.
I'd probably say people need to let go of their past and just move on.
Okay.
Is what I would say.
Okay.
Because it's like, if you're letting the past to, like, control your life, and that's, like, if you're just kind of going and, like, holding on to that, then you're not going to be able to move forward. And then you're going to, like, waste your life on everything that already happened. And, like, the past already happened. It's in the past for a reason.
Okay.
Kind of thing.
What makes you more angry at yourself? When you are deemed unoriginal by other people, or when you're deemed useless by other people?
Useless, for sure.
I hate when people don't give me credit.
Do people critique you for your lack of utility often?
I do. Because she didn't used to not have utility. Well, because when she was... Before she was with me, she was constantly... Nobody ever criticized her for lack of utility. But then as soon as she got with her last boyfriend, she got criticized often. And then I've been criticizing her because she's not working and getting stuff done when she normally did all the time. She was never criticized before.
Oh, so you got in a relationship with somebody who liked to fuck with your identity.
Yeah. That's what she got with somebody like
I was
that.
in that relationship my last relationship too with Kimberly. She just shit on me continually. It was like, what is happening here? I
Yeah.
never experienced it before. It's like, hey, what is this?
Yeah.
This is not consistent with my sheltered life. Okay, well, good news. Good news. I think utility's dumb. So remember, if you're not feeling very useful, you're a hell of a lot more useful than my woman. And she's got one primary use, really. But she's very useful in that capacity. But that goes with the territory. But the thing is, I don't care. I'm not very useful either. So that's why it's good to have 6th and 7th slot flipped in a couple, because the thing you're blind at, the other person doesn't care about, and vice versa. Which is how it is with us. I don't care about her utility, and she doesn't care about my lack of actual real self, I guess. Okay, so if you have a yard sale, how likely are you to sell something and then go, I wish I hadn't sold that because I actually use that all the time?
I wouldn't do that. I would only place things that like I didn't use or like something that I didn't want, and then I put out there because like I generally would know like what I want and like what I like use all the time, and I probably wouldn't have the yard sale to begin with, but like if I did, then I would only put things out there that like I either was no longer using, have never used since I purchased the item or something that I just didn't favor anymore.
I don't even know if she owns anything that's not useful.
No, yeah.
She
I have one sentimental thing, but that's it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have a lot more than things.
Your colorfully bedazzled unicorn pony.
Colorfully bedazzled unicorn pony?
You secretly keep in the shed out back.
Oh.
When you need to get girly, you're like, okay, that's it. I gotta go get girly, and you go hang out with your unicorn pony.
No, it's a jewelry box from one of my deceased close family friends that they gave to me.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you wouldn't, in general, describe yourself as sentimental or nostalgic. That's an exception.
No, I don't think so. I don't think I would.
Okay, talk to me about your getting up in the morning. How quickly do you go from asleep to awake? Is there a transition period? And if so, do you have any rituals you perform, like get yourself your cup of coffee, sit down, maybe watch the sunrise, or whatever? Like, do you have any kind of SI kind of relationship to getting up?
I generally would get up, go to the bathroom, brush my teeth, do like that kind of usual stuff, and then go to my computer and then start working or doing something in that regard, and then get breakfast eventually. But like most of the time, I wouldn't even remember that I was hungry, and then he would always cook. And he's like, are you hungry? I'm like, oh, yeah, I guess I am. And then he makes food. And I'm like, oh, thanks. Or he just brings it to me randomly. I'm like, oh, I forgot I was hungry. Here, thanks. And I eat it.
Yeah, it's general.
When he gently scolds you about your lack of usefulness, what are you usually doing instead of being useful?
Well, lately, by lately, I mean like the last couple of years since I got out of that relationship, I generally so I originally had this plan that I was gonna.
So loud.
You were just as loud.
Was I?
Yes.
Oh shoot.
You're practically screaming.
Just for reference point, I appreciate the levels as they are because we're about the same volume level on each of our respective audio channels in the recording.
Perfect. Okay. Well, shoot, I forgot the question. Thanks. What was it? Useful. Oh, yes. So after I got out of that really bad relationship, and I kind of felt really bad about myself essentially, and then I lost my track on where I was gonna go with my life. So originally, since before I was even 8 years old, I was like, I'm gonna be a doctor. This is what I'm gonna do, and I had a plan to go to be a surgeon, and I was pushing towards it. I did full-time high school classes, full-time college classes at the same time. I was going and doing a whole bunch of stuff all the time. And then after that relationship, it knocked me down a lot. Not in a good way, not in a healthy, you have a really high ego, we need to knock you down if you pigs out in that kind of respect, but more along the lines of he messed with I want to say who I was, in a sense of would like call me useless, call me worthless. He would like a lot of verbal things that he would say and like do like throw hammers at me and like a bunch of really like not good things. Yeah, bad
Was
relationship.
he BPD or what?
Huh?
Was he borderline personality disorder?
Yeah, it's bipolar or something.
Yeah.
Had he been
Something.
abused as a kid?
No, he's just extremely pampered.
Yeah.
Oh.
So then after I got out of the relationship, I started to really question myself and like who I was kind of a thing, and which ended up leading to I stopped my long-term goals on what I was like going to do because I'm like, oh my god, I don't know if I can do it. I don't know about all these things, and I had a lot of self-doubt in that regard. And then I just kind of fell off a cliff.
Yeah, I went and did a plan, and she asked me to do a plan because she said she works so well on plans. So I tried to plan for 2 hours, and it was just like all math and a whole bunch of different things. And then she's like, what the hell is this?
I'm like, this isn't a plan.
It's a plan. We've got math here. This is the general idea of what we need to do.
Yeah, and I'm like, this isn't a plan. This isn't a 1, 2, 3, 4. This is not a plan at all.
And then she was like,
I was like, this is math.
this is nothing.
Yeah.
And then she went and just used that because I'm like, no, you can use this information and then you can make your own plan if you want to make it. This is my plan. You get to say,
I'm like, how is
you're
that?
good. I've got like
Yeah.
18 different calculators on how to pull up different things. And she's like, this is useless. And I'm like, it's not useless. It's a calculator. It tells you what you need to do based on the calculator because otherwise how are you going to know what to do? And then she goes and says it's crap. Because she goes and wants to plan everything.
Okay, let me give you a scenario and ask you to do a little planning for me,
Okay.
So you've gone out to get some milk at the store or something, and you've been and you buy it, you discover you're the millionth customer and you've won a prize. And it's an all expense paid day of anything you can do within 6-hour drive of where you are. And whatever the activity is, whatever this thing you want to do, it can't be something you purchase to take home, but it has to be some kind of activity. It will be fully funded. You get you eat your meals out, and if it's like a hot air balloon ride, they'll pick the hot air balloon ride, whatever, like that kind of stuff. So you got 1 day, full day's activity, full all paid expenses, and unfortunately, you have to tell them what you're going to do before you have an opportunity to consult with them.
Okay.
So what now? Talk me through your thought process.
Well, I first think about what is in my 6-hour general radius, which Portland is around 6 hours away from us. So I'd do something up in Portland because they have a lot more things there. And then I'd pull up the things that I knew around Portland that I would generally like. Now, would I be able to take another person with me?
Yeah, it's for two,
myself.
but it's a couples thing, but you can't consult him before you make your decision on what you're doing.
So what I'd probably do is I'd pick something that we both would end up liking. So I'd probably pick something along the lines of like going to OMSI, which is a science museum thing that like it's like hands-on museum or science, and they like do a bunch of stuff and there's experiments and stuff. So I'd probably pick something along the lines of going there and then going to it's hard because I would want to like look it up first. I want to look up what I have in that area. I want to know how long that we're going to be at each of the different places, how much time that I have, how much money is you said it's all inclusive.
Yeah.
Because I
Okay,
include
cool.
food and drinks, I include gas. Like I want to.
Okay, cool.
Everything
That's very.
Obviously,
Your answer there is very revelatory, even though it's not an answer, because you walked me through the things you think you need to know in order to structure this properly or to take advantage of it properly. So that's revealing in the sense that if you were, say, SI in the front stack, you would probably go, well, I know. We go back to that adorable bed and breakfast that time that Aunt Judy came into town, remember? And they brought us the most delicious maple smoked bacon. You're not SI. So, in fact,
I should go to the casino, and then because then you can, if it's all inclusive, you can get as many chips as you want at the casino.
That's a good idea.
Then you get to cash them in.
Food and drinks are paid for. That's a good idea.
Okay, so today is Saturday. Can you tell me which was a better day, Wednesday or Thursday?
They're generally about the same, so probably either one.
Generally about the same.
Okay, how did they differ from each other? Can you remember some specific things that happened on Wednesday that didn't on Thursday, or vice versa?
Generally, we're kind of stuck in a loop right now, to where we're doing the same thing because we're kind of like looping
Yeah, well, I mean, is there ever a day when you go, wow, our days these days are filled up with so many memorable specifics? No. That day will never arrive when you say that.
No, probably not. Yeah,
I guess like on Saturdays are usually our days that we go and do other things like that. Like Saturdays, I consider the most memorable because that's when we go and take a trip up to Eugene, and then like he does photography on those standard days. So like it's generally like Saturdays that I
hope your name.
consider.
I hope we just went to the store.
Yeah, we did, but
that was nice.
That's not memorable.
I hope that your last name is generally and his last name is usually, and you become Mr. and Mrs. generally hyphen usually.
Yeah, that's funny.
Okay. Let's talk about. Are you more likely to successfully avoid some sort of rules by schmoozing, or successfully avoid schmoozing by checking off all the right boxes?
Avoid rules by schmoozing, or avoid schmoozing by checking off the boxes.
In other words, I've done all the technicalities. You have to do it, so I don't have to be nice to you. Even is avoiding schmoozing by doing that versus avoiding having to do all the technicalities by schmoozing. Hey, you can let this one slide.
I'd probably avoid the schmoozing.
She avoids the schmoozing, and I do the schmoozing.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll go and schmooze somebody, and then she'll be like, "But I did all of these things with Brandon. He should like me by now." And I'm like, "That doesn't work that way." I'm like, "You gotta talk to him first and get all that done."
You should hold up your checklist, your book that says, "Make people like you. Make people like you in 10 steps." I've done all 10 steps.
Yeah, I'm like, why? I'm like, what's wrong? I'm like, what am I doing? I'm like, I've done all the things. Why?
I have to go there and explain. I'm like, well, you got to count in that he has feelings, whether they're good or not, because like, they probably feel about you because of this. And she's like, but I did all these things, and I'm like, it doesn't really work like that.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's say, do you have a new long-term plan? Do you have like a 5-year plan, 10-year plan? Now that you got rid of your doctor plan, did you replace it with something else?
Yeah, so the doctor plan ended up getting replaced by owning my own company now. And we're probably working with him towards a company that we're going to have together. So the long-term plan is more along the lines of getting out of the current situation that we're in, and then building up money through our reselling of different items, and then taking that reselling money to go and then doing that for, I believe, around a year or so. And then from after doing that for a year, going and switching that off into funneling that for Google ads to go towards a website that'll go and generally, so yeah, I guess so. I guess I would generally say that I have a plan.
Okay.
Now. She's got that, and I'm just, she's definitely playing.
Do you have a plan that includes things like statuses, like I will own my third home by age 40. I will have my second child at age 43. I will.
She has to win.
Yeah, I do have to win. Yeah, I definitely did that beforehand, because when I was going and wanting to be a doctor, I was like, okay, well, most likely the odds are I'm going to meet somebody when I was in medical school, and then from medical school, I'd probably be together for this amount of time, and then from there, I'd probably have kids around 35, give or take, because I'd be a surgeon for X amount of time. So yes, I guess I wanted to have a house when I was in medical school.
She said she'd have Gucci bags at this time and a blue Corvette there.
Yeah, I do want a baby blue Corvette.
Like, I started my business because I didn't want to be told what to do by everybody anymore, because I couldn't handle it. And she wants to do it so she can be the winning and be the top and beat out everybody else and tell everybody else how much they suck.
Okay. So,
how much they suck, just, I want stuff.
Okay, so, do you remember your dreams? The actual dreams from nighttime, not your aspirations, the actual dreams?
I haven't actually had a dream that I could remember. Like, so it was weird because I had one the other day. But yes, I generally do remember my dreams. before then, before like a couple weeks ago, I hadn't had a dream that I could actually remember. It was just I'd wake up and not even know that I dreamed. Obviously, you do dream because that's how sleep works, but that not the one I could remember until like a couple weeks ago. And then before that, like growing up in high school and everything, and then in college, then I did remember. I did have dreams, and I did remember my dreams. I sometimes, depending on the dream, I would try to figure out what it meant. Like, I had a dream about my deceased stepfather, and he came to me in the dream, and then I was like, okay, I woke up crying and in tears, and I was like, wow. And then I kind of wrote down the dream because I wanted to make sure to remember it, and then I wrote down like why I think that he came to me in the dream, and like I tried to figure out like how that was impactful to me in a way.
How long were you in that bad relationship?
I was in that bad relationship for almost 2 years, but before then, I grew up, like my house that I grew up in, my mother was a hoarder, and I didn't have a connection with my father because he was a very bad alcoholic. So after I got out of that situation with my mom, the hoarding situation, then I went into that relationship with him. And then that relationship with him lasted for 2 years, and then I got into a relationship with Peter, and then we've been together for a little over 2 years.
How, like, okay, I stuck in my abusive relationship, you know, where the thing about an abusive relationship is it breaks all of the he said, she said kind of rules. It takes two to tango. In an abusive relationship, one person's the problem and the other person's not.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
It took me 2.5 years to get out of mine. So why did it take you so long to get out of yours?
It took me 2 years to get out of that one because what I was doing is I was staying at his grandparents' place. That's where he was living, and because I wasn't living with my mother anymore, and I was going to college at a local college near his grandparents' place, and this was fresh out of high school, and I was paying them rent to rent out one of the rooms that they had at their house, and then my car had broken down, and so I didn't have a car, and I was only using his car. Yes. So and then I couldn't go back with my mom because or any of my other family members because my mom was spewing a bunch of lies to all of my family members. So I was only able to go to school and to work using his car. And so then I would go and I kept putting money to the side to try and get out of that situation. And as soon as I was able to have enough money to pay him to get the car, that's pretty much when I got out.
I see. So how long did it take you to realize it wasn't a good relationship?
Pretty quick.
Like she came crying to me because funny story is I was talking to her over the dating app because the other guy didn't know how to talk to women, so I was trying to help him. So she was talking to me, so she thought it was me, and then within 3 weeks, 4 weeks, she was crying over how horrible he was and wanted to leave him then. And
like a month in,
I was trying to help her realize all the things because I was trying to help everybody figure out what all their problems were and how to fix them, and I was kind of doing all that, and then I was trying to help her fix the other guy and also fix the other guy at the same time.
So like about a month. Yeah, around there.
It's probably my fault that she stayed so long.
Well, okay, so I'd like to see if you can give me some more particulars. Can you give me any example of a potato touch story?
A potato type story? Oh, like forgetting something and then earlier?
Like realizing when you say to yourself, oh, Joy, I've been focusing on something that's actually turned out to be irrelevant. Like I've been waiting for them to touch my potato, but I didn't order a potato. Joy, something like that.
Well, I felt like I was having those earlier with the anything. I don't know. I was relating with what you were saying earlier with the, like when you were talking about you were going to the store and then you were like getting in the car, talking to, I don't remember who you said, you were talking to someone and then you were going to the store to get the cigarettes and you're like, oh shoot, where are we going? And you forgot. Like I have those, but I don't know if that'd be considered like that kind of a moment.
Okay, when you have a moment where you're like, where am I going right now? Or like, why did I walk into this room? Do you have that moment ever? Like,
yeah, I do have those kinds of moments, but then because it's usually what it is I'm like thinking in my head, and I'm either like going and I'm thinking about something that's completely unrelated to what I'm doing, and then I'm like, oh shoot, and I'm like, wait, I'm in here. I'm like, I had a reason for why I'm in here, and then I have to like retrace my steps like in my head. I don't physically do it, but I retrace my steps in my head. I'm like, okay, why did I come in here? What was the purpose? Blah blah blah. And then I'm like, oh yeah, that's what I needed. I needed to grab my pen or my phone or something like that.
I get distracted way quicker.
So you put it sort of in a frame of reference as what thing that I needed to solve in this project that prompted me to come in here?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like, what did I... Because I was like, okay, I had a reason for coming in here. Now, what was that reason? And then I tried thinking about what I was thinking about when I was in the other room. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure. That's SI. Trying to think about what you were thinking about in the other room is SI.
Okay.
Now, everybody has some SI. So it's like whether it's polar or... I'm increasingly thinking yours is also polar. But
Okay.
it might not be. It might be H slot.
Well, why I know she's not an SI top is because I've got all over the place random shit. All over the place. I'm just doing random. Like, for example, I was like, okay, with the dog. We have a dog, right? And our dog is small, so I'm like, okay, well, with the dog, I don't want him to pee outside because it's going to be really, well, I was annoyed that peeing outside takes so long. It's so annoying. So I made him this little crate thing, and he's got a grass mat and a potty pad underneath the grass mat, and I trained the dog to be like a cat. And I think, like, the SI people, I think, would get really pissed because that's not what fits into a regular standard house. And then on top of that, I put it in over here in the bathroom, and I turned the bathtub into a cleaning station for those mats where it's got a little process where it goes through one grass mat to another grass mat to another grass mat. So that's where I was thinking she was an SI top, but I mean, I don't, because she seems to be okay with all my random shit that I do all the time. Like, our whole entire house is a giant mess because I've got tons of products.
Well, she did grow up with a hoarder.
Yeah, so she's okay with that, I guess, yeah.
Of course, that's just particularistic experience, so what does that matter? Okay, well, interesting. I'm trying to figure out whether you're 7 or 8 with the SI. It's definitely at the bottom, okay? And the thing is, you were able to give me one particular example, but I haven't been able to get anything else specific out of you since. So, I mean, I'm leaning more towards 7th, but so far, the distinctions I've heard him draw between the two of you sound like something that I normally don't get into at all, which is Enneagram differences. Enneagram. Yeah, it's pronounced Enneagram. But I said it in my head when I read the word first. I pronounced it Enneagram. It was a long time after I read it, a bunch of times that I finally heard somebody say it. So I got stuck with Enneagram.
That's really funny.
Okay, so I mean, because you are much more like 3 or...
Yeah, I was thinking 3-2 for her, and I was thinking 8-7 or 7-8 for me.
You seem like a 7? You got a 7 in there somewhere?
Me, I think.
Yeah. For an ENTJ, you're a 7. And that's what ENTJ 7s look like, is for them, plain is starting their own business because they don't like other people having to say in how things go. Whereas 3 plays out more like, I gotta win. And the thing is, I'm kind of I gotta win-ish too, but only about zero-sum competitions. Only about some of them, if I expect myself to be good at it, you know?
Yeah, I never really cared about winning. That's the one thing I didn't really see about ENTJ. Like in team sports for me, like, I just didn't care. Like, they tried to move me up to varsity for a lot of things in high school, and as soon as they did that, I was like, you're taking all the fun out of it for me. Like, I don't care to win. I just want to go through and do this thing over here, and as soon as people started trying to, like, impose their rules on me, I just was done with it, and like, I wouldn't do it. Like, that was the one thing that I didn't relate with. On like, I that's where I thought I was
more
an
4 than
ENTP
7.
that was like looked like an ENTJ.
That's more 4 than 7, actually.
That makes sense.
4 is the iconoclastic Enneagram that goes, what am I rebelling against? What do you got?
Yeah. It was like, if somebody didn't have a reason why for doing something that was logical, I was just like, this is bad. I don't want to do this because it's not logical.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like, school made no sense because it wasn't logical.
So you won at cheerleading. You became the captain. What else did you win at in high school?
I was the captain of the cheerleading team, the captain of the softball team, the secretary of my class, the secretary of my 4-H club. I was in the Key Club. I was in National Honor Society. I did full-time college and full-time high school classes out at the same time. And I also...
And why were you like that?
Your degrees, too.
Why were you like that, do you think?
I don't know. What I wanted was, I knew that I was, okay, so because I grew up in a poor household, I knew that in order to go and be a doctor, I would have to go to medical school, and then I would have to go to college, and in order to get to college, I'd have to be able to have scholarships because I wouldn't be able to afford it. So I was like, okay, I need to take as many college classes now while it's free because my high school is paying for it. So I was like, I need to take as many as I possibly can now so I wouldn't have to pay for them later.
Okay, so let's say, I'm going to pause for a second. Let's say you suddenly, you walk outside, let's say, pretend you have a balcony where you live. I don't know if you do or not.
Okay.
Pretend you do. You walk out on the balcony, you take a deep breath, a moment to breathe. Okay, a moment to breathe. Now, how do you use that moment to breathe? Do you immediately go back into, okay, moment to breathe. So, after I complete task X, I'm going to need to go to task Y and then to task Z. Is that what's going on in your head? Or do you go, moment to breathe. I can get a drink. My back is kind of achy. Or, moment to breathe. Look at the beautiful sunset. I'm just going to look at it. Its colors are filling my eyes with their glory.
I mostly do. I have, like, the moment to breathe, like, when I'm in the shower. I usually don't, like, turn anything on. Like, I don't have any music playing or anything. And I just kind of, like, I'm in the shower. And then I close my eyes for a second. I'm like, okay, what do I need to do today? And then that's my moment to breathe, I guess, is what I consider that. But if I had a balcony, I'd probably be like, okay, well, and I'm like, this is what I've done, and this is what I probably need to keep doing. And then I, like, kind of, like, use it to structure myself.
So your moment to breathe, be it in the shower or the balcony, still includes a to-do list.
How she made all her decisions in high school is pros and cons.
Pros and cons.
So you're classic utilitarian. All right.
Yeah, she's a utilitarian. Like, she destroys me on utility in comparison.
All right. So how do you manage your own perceptions of yourself having been negatively impacted by that relationship? Like, in other words, how do you understand your own relationship with your own ontology? Do you feel like you have control over how you spend your time, or do you feel like you have, or that you've lost some of that ability to direct your will as you would like to?
I definitely think that it interfered with my ability to do things, because what it was is it eventually got, like, so out of control that I would have to go and ask to be able to do things, which was, like, the opposite of the kind of person that I was, because I'd always be the kind of person to go through and just, like, do the thing. Yeah, I was very, very much so, like, demanding and, like, confrontational. And then I became more reserved, and then I would have to ask permission for things. So when it really
Whoa.
That.
Are you gesticulating? Did you ask me if you could gesticulate?
What?
Just kidding.
Oh.
It's been a while since she's up. She was pissed as soon as she got out. She was pissed the whole relationship.
I was pissed. I was really fucking pissed.
She never got, like, stuck in it. She was just pissed the whole time.
I see.
Yeah.
So, but that doesn't explain then why you feel as though there's any sort of persistent or remnant impact upon the self if, in fact, you are less productive than you might otherwise have been. Once you're out of it, if you're just pissed, wouldn't you revert right back to?
That's what I thought.
Okay, yeah, I am not asking you.
Well, what it eventually came to was I went into kind of like, because I had all those negative self-talk that he would go and give me, and then it turned into I flipped that around on myself, is what ended up happening. So then I was doubting my own abilities to do things. I was doubting that I could get anything done. I was doubting that I was making the right choices with my career. I was doubting that I was basically doubting every aspect of myself, I guess.
Were you actually spending your time doubting? Like, were you sitting around not doing anything except thinking to yourself, I doubt I can do this?
Yeah. I was like, I don't know if I'll be able to do this. I don't know if this is good. I don't know if this is what I want for my career. I don't know. And I started getting into like, oh my gosh, what do I want? I became really hyper emotional, which is like the opposite.
Would those actual minutes be spent just sitting there someplace silently and this would be going on in your head?
Yeah.
Okay, like sitting at the table just morose, brooding?
Yeah, or like, I would be like doing like a little bit of college or something like that. And then I would just kind of like sit there for a second. And then I'm like, am I even, like, is this going to be a good assignment? Like, when I turn this in, am I even going to get a good grade? Is this, and I, like, would have, like, this gigantic negative self-talk that I would just, like, give to myself. And then I'm like, I don't even know why I'm doing this. Like, it's not going to be good. I'm not going to turn in, and when it gets in, it's not going to be good. I'm not going to get a good grade. And then all these bad things are going to happen from me doing this. And then I'm like, I'm not going to get a grade on this, which means I'm going to have a bad grade on this, which means I'm not going to be able to pass this test, which means I won't be able to pass the MCAT, which means this and this. And then I just had this cycling in my head all the time. Yeah.
I fail much more comfortably than you do.
Yeah.
I just go, this is boring.
That's what I did earlier today. So I was like, I just can't do this. I have to get out of the house.
Yeah.
It took me 2 hours to get to that mode. It takes me 2 hours per time.
Okay, well, the thing is, do you guys have any reason to think you are different types from each other?
Yeah, like, do you? Wait, hold on. You said you're not asking. Should you? Is her question or is it both of our questions?
Well, in this case, I'm asking both of you because what I'm hearing here is let me just sort of sum up what I've heard.
Okay.
Essentially, everything I've heard from her also suggests ENTJ. The initial question I asked, she gave me one concrete example that was usually I would say that's indicative of something better than polar, but it was kind of fluky, and I think it's true that women tend to remember certain kinds of anecdotes for social purposes a little bit more than men do because it's expected more of them.
Yeah.
So she probably has a stockpile of a few anecdotes that she can bust out if called upon to produce one. But when I actually push for the SI specifics, there aren't anything there. There's nothing there. It's just a bunch of usuallys and generallys. Right?
So what's an SI specific for you? Because maybe I do have them.
So if you were going to give me SI specifics, you would say, tell me an anecdote. Like,
what's an anecdote?
Okay, an anecdote is, this morning, I went down to the gas station to get cigarettes, and I got out of the car with my $10.
So like an explanation of like what happened?
And let me finish my anecdote.
Okay.
And I remembered, after I got out of the car, I had my cash in my wallet. I knew I had like $16 or something in my wallet. But then I got out of the car and I looked in my wallet and I realized, oh, geez, there are no coins in my wallet. Now, I know that it's more than $10, but less than $10.50. But I don't recount exactly the amount it is after tax here. So I went back to my car and I gathered 30 cents. And I took my $10 with my 30 cents up to the window. And I said, I'd like a pack of Marlboro Reds, please. And she said, that'll be $10.35. And I said, okay, hold on. I parked right at the gas pump. I said, I'll be right back. I'm going to go get another nickel from my car. And I went to my car and I got that nickel. And by the time I got back to the window, she'd already put my $10.30 in the gas register and pushed out the cigarettes. That's how trusting she was that I was going to return with that nickel. And I did return with it. I placed the nickel in the thing. I grabbed my cigarettes and got back in the car and drove home.
So essentially, like,
specifics.
Well, I'm good at. I could tell you the specifics of what we just did earlier. Like or is it something like a problem?
Go ahead. Tell me an anecdote, just like that.
Specifics.
Okay, so if an anecdote's like a specifics of what happened. So like earlier, like when at about 7:30-ish this morning, I was getting really bored because I'm placing my orders over and over and over and over and over again. I hate doing that. So I told Kyla that we needed to go to the store because, one, we were out of bread, and I was upset that we were out of bread. So we went over and we got the dog because the dog was gonna bark and it was gonna annoy the crap out of my mother, who's usually sleeping upstairs. So we got the dog and we went to the car, and then with the car, because I didn't change the damn tire because the stupid tire needs to just get it patched, Kyla went and grabbed the it's a little tire pumper charger thing. Yeah. I grabbed those because I always mess up the stupid car. So and I had this for years because I always mess up the stupid car, and I always need a jumper or something like that because I never take care of the stupid car. So then we go out to the car and we drive up and over the hill. We have to come out here. We go out the direction of here. We make a left, and then we make another left, and then we go and make another left to go up a hill, over a hill. And then we went there. We were talking about personality while in the car. I went out around to the left of the car, out behind it, over to the I guess I'd make another left, and then I'd go and I put the red tire pumper down first, and then I went and attached it, but I was annoyed because the red tire pumper was making too much noise.
All right, cool. So can you do that too, Kyla? Can you tell an equivalent story of...
Like, go off of what you said?
Continue where he left off with the same level of detail.
Well, he got in the car because he was complaining that it was, like, really cold outside. So he got in the car to wait for a while. And then he got back out, and the dog was, like, sitting at my lap or whatever because I was in the passenger seat. And then he got out, and he, like, put the thing back in the car. And then we went down, we made a left, went to Safeway. And then after we got to Safeway, we went and got...
What happened after that is I was upset because the red tire pumper was making the noise. I actually got the yellow tire pumper out, step 2, and then I went and attached that, which goes faster. And then I waited for one car to come out because we had to wait for that car.
Okay, so she wasn't wrong. She wasn't wrong. She just skipped a bunch of stuff, right?
She skipped a whole bunch. Well, sort of. She skipped the stuff about the me taking out the other one.
I'm not wrong. I just skipped things.
Yeah, then we went to Safeway, but then there was a whole bunch between that Safeway, like the yellow light thing that pops up. But that's why I said I thought about the past, present, future, and then it kind of coalesces into a whole. Because like I can take everything on the past. It's just like I don't remember, like I don't remember it. Like I conceptually understand everything around it. I just don't like picture. Like I can't physically see the picture, but I like remember what happened.
Okay, so.
If you feel like we should continue, by the way, then I'd be glad if you have an extra hour to throw another $50 that way.
Sure. I normally go over without expecting people to pay anything extra. It's fine if you don't, because I prefer to get it. I prefer to get things right, you know. So here's the deal. Can you tell me an equivalent anecdote from a different occasion? Maybe one where not you, Kyla. Maybe one where you don't, where he wasn't there, so he doesn't correct you when you're telling it.
Okay. Sure. I went over to my mom's a few days ago, I think it was. I went over to her house, to go and like talk to her. So what I did was I left the house. I went and I drove down there. It took like an hour to get there because she lives about an hour away from where we are. So then I drove there and I spent like 6 hours there or 5 hours there talking with her or something like that. And then I came back and drove back. We just kind of like talked about like what I wanted to do with my life essentially. But then afterwards I came and drove the whole way back. And then I had to get gas on the way there. But that's pretty much the gist.
Her details are horrible.
Okay, so you note that a detail spreads over the course of 6 hours, right? You noted that, but that it would seem as though
just send that over.
Peter has a more robust relationship with SI than you.
He has a really good memory. Like he'll remember something, and I'm like, how the fuck did you even remember that? Like he'll just like kind of say something, or he'll reference something, and be like, oh, what about this? And he'll, like,
okay, so here's the deal. Here's the deal. And I'm just gonna throw this out there. Where I am right now is that she's an ENTJ, and you actually are an INTJ. But the reason I would even bother to revisit the thing is because I realized I didn't push hard enough on your SI. And this is typical of 8th slot NI. It can fool me sometimes. You have to push and then you don't get anything. You have to push harder. With you, I can push it out of you. I need to now see if I can push it out of her. So, can you talk to me about 2 different Christmases and the differences between them? Her
or me?
Yeah, her. What's your name?
Kyla.
Kyla.
Yeah.
I have to keep looking at the bottom corner, remembering. Okay, his name's Peter, but you don't have your name written anywhere. Okay, Kyla, can you distinguish between 2 different Christmases?
Sure. It'll be easier for me to go and distinguish one from like my early childhood and one that was more recent because those ones were more different. So for my early childhood, I would go down to my uncle's house in California. He lived in like Concord area, which is kind of like by San Francisco by about like, I don't know, like an hour and a half or something. And so we'd go and we'd drive down there and we took like 8 hours or something like that. And so we'd go down there in the car and then we would spend like around 2 weeks down there, and that would encompass like the winter break that you get when you're with school, kind of a thing. And we generally just kind of like not really do a whole lot during the time leading up to Christmas, but on Christmas Day, we'd wake up in the morning really early, and then I'd always have my presents and everything wrapped before like we went down, because I wanted to make sure that everything was like set so nobody would see anything. But then on Christmas Day itself, we would wake up in the morning, my brother and I and my 2 cousins at the time. We would wake up and we would wake everybody else up in the house, and we'd go out to the living room area with like the tree. And I'd always sit close to the tree because I'd always delegate and hand out all the gifts to everybody else. And then I'd always like give one to each person, so that way each person had one to be opening kind of at the same time, so we get it done quicker. And then at the same time, usually my uncle would open his like the fastest, so then he'd be able to go and be making like the Christmas dinner. And then he would start doing that, and then while everybody else was still opening presents. And then we'd have Christmas dinner usually around like between 5 and 6, give or take. And then we'd all be like around the table eating together.
Let me stop you for a second. Are you telling me about a specific Christmas, or a Christmas that occurred repeatedly over the course of 4 or 5 years in various incarnations?
Well, it was pretty much the same Christmas for those years. Like, we don't do the same things. Like,
you were a whole year older than the Christmas before.
A whole year?
Yeah. But it was generally the same. Like, I'd always go and delegate things and, like, just hand out the presents. Like, I'd always do it. And I always, like, grab the presents. I'm like, okay, here, Jesse. Here, Grandma. Here, Uncle Adam. Here. And then I would... and then
your description of Christmas invalidates the notion that on given Christmases, a person might have incurred the status of naughty or nice. If in fact Christmases were always the same, Santa wouldn't even need to check his list once.
I guess that's true, yeah.
Okay, so, I mean, that seems like that's SI polar in the sense that not only when I ask you to distinguish between 2 Christmases, do you first reinterpret the question to say, distinguish between Christmas in childhood and Christmas in adulthood, but when I ask you if you're talking about a specific Christmas, you invalidate the notion that there was a specific Christmas, that in fact Christmases were always the same.
Right.
Yeah.
Whereas what he did once, when he really, you actually want me to tell you all those boring details? He was successfully able to relate.
Like, I can remember them, I just don't know what. Like,
okay.
I'll go and figure out what she's doing. I don't want to explain it all.
So, it's somewhat reassuring in the sense that, while your answers, Peter, were very textbook ENTJ answers, Kyla's affect is much more ENTJ.
The only reason why I did all that is because in my household, I had to leave at 17 because the whole parent situation, I didn't really have any. Well, I had one parent, and then the other one was absent, and then I got kicked out at 17. I lived in my car for 3 months. So then directly after that was when I became really a lot more ENTJ-like, because I had to be really independent. Before that, like, I was kind of all over the place going through, and like if there was a hill, I would go through and I'd be like, okay, we can make a fort out of this, we can do that, we can do this. And I've got pictures of when I was like, oh, okay, we can build this cool thing out of this stuff in the forest, and I'd take it together and I'd like make a little fort with people, or I'd go through and I'd see some sand and we'd take out people and take out friends, and I made them dig a little hole around it, and then we made chairs into that. And so like that's where I was like, when they said could be things over any, it was making sense to me, because that's usually
you do self-identify as more intuitive than I would expect necessarily. Maybe an ENTJ would self-identify more with the solvency. You actually
that's where I've been flipping between the two, and I've been confused between the two.
Well, then
I just didn't get the subconscious part, because like I don't realize, like, their general definition of NIs, they're going through and they're saying, oh, they realize answers and it's unconscious, and then it just kind of comes to them, and I'm like, no, it doesn't come to me. Nothing comes to me. It's like I gotta logically think through the grand majority of everything that I do. I do math on it. I get it all together. I go through and logically, it all comes and kind of coalesces into my head. Like the whole.
But the
main reason I hired you is because I've been all over the place.
You're NIing bigger things, though. It's still NI, it's just bigger things. It's like doing all those component pieces of work is only meaningful if they all fit together into a single whole. So I do shit tons of different components of work, but they don't fit together at all. So I just have this weird thing, right?
So the difference between NIs and NE is my NI is just kind of trying to find the underlying kind of puzzle piece.
Well, I mean, you could think of it as, since it's in a TE frame, because you got your operational values TE if you're INTJ, you're still thinking of it in terms of, I need to get the frame right, and then everything will cascade down from that. Okay?
Yeah, essentially. So that's why I came to you, so you could go and correct on us on where we're wrong on everything.
So let me do a test to see if I can distinguish between you two, which is an FE test. I'm going to ask you, Peter, to do it first. I'd like you to say the following sentence, first seriously and then sarcastically. And the sentence is, oh yes, this should work perfectly.
So seriously and then sarcastically?
Yeah.
Okay, so sarcastically it comes easier. So you'd be like, oh, yes, this will work perfectly. And then seriously it would be like, oh, yes, this will work perfectly, I guess. But that's not like super serious. That's kind of like a whole different way. So that's kind of like somewhere in between serious and then not at the same time. So it's more like, oh, yes, this will. No, that's like, that's overdoing it at that point. It'd be like, oh, yes. No, I don't know.
Like,
you try it.
You try it.
Okay.
I can do sarcastic.
So, like, sarcastic, like, oh, yes, this will work serious. Like,
that's
this will work perfectly.
That's not sarcastic.
And then, like, oh, yeah, that'll work perfectly. Like, more like that, I guess.
So, and that's clearly the distinction. So, the funny thing is, the reason you can do sarcastic more easily than regular is because that's the standard expression of it. The standard expression of, oh yes, this will work perfectly, is sarcastic. Right. It's unlikely it's much more rare that something actually does work perfectly, and right. it elicits an ejaculation of oh hooray. Instead, it's much more likely that people are like, well,
oh yeah, this will work perfectly. Right. Yeah, I get you.
Like I'm having trouble with the drivers for my camera on my computer, and somebody hands me a banana, you know. Oh, right. This will help.
This is exactly what I needed here. You know,
appreciate the help.
But the thing is, you sort of, if you could be a line coach almost. Kyla, sorry.
No, you're good.
You could be a line coach almost with the expression of, oh yeah, that'll work perfectly. It's got this sort of, you've got an ability to generate, I guess you'd say, creative FE that FE polar lacks. And what often happens with everybody with their polar is when you start asking about their polar, they start rambling, and kind of like dropping off, like, I don't know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I do it too. I start talking about FI. If you ask me about my feelings, it'd be like, well, I feel, it's like feelings are, I guess I feel normal, but I know normal is not really an emotion. So, it's like, I guess I feel kind of like, is like happy normal? It's kind of happy. I just be like, what are you saying, Eric? You're not making any sense, because it defies one's own conceptual frameworks.
Standard method of
implicitly based on the stack. So what we just see here is that, in fact, I rushed the first typing. Peter's an INTJ. Kyla is a ENTJ. And you can see it in the polar with the FE and in the SI.
That makes sense.
Because you can't mimic those voices, but I can. I can't remember, but you can.
I can do sarcasm, yeah. That seems more accurate.
I can remember, but I just get the gist.
Because what I do when I'm thinking through things is it's more like I'm taking everything around, everything I know with all of the information, and I'm just trying to find the connection between it all.
Okay.
Essentially, is how I'm doing it. So I'll take in everything around, and I'll take in, like, all the things that happen back here. Like, if I'm trying to figure out Kyla or this whole situation or anything, I'm just trying to take in everything about Kyla, what she's doing and all of that, everything what you're doing and all of that, everything I know based on psychology, because I've read I've read 100 psychology books and then another like 200 extra other books, and I'll take in all that information and my current state of living and everything else, and then try to figure out what the connection is and what we're moving towards.
Right.
So like I figured out how I think, and then I was just trying to work back from there and what that was.
So it's
Did you watch Full Metal Alchemist since you watch anime as well?
You're hitting on. There's a couple of things I haven't watched that everybody assumes I must have, including Bleach and Full Metal Alchemist. I haven't watched them.
Bleach is bad. Don't watch that. So in there, he goes through a thing that's like got these little like lines, kind of like no, it's not strand. It's they come out of like a movie reel, like the little like things that go through it, and it goes around in a little circle thing, and it's kind of like like film. And then there's like a bunch of different little film things, and I really resonated with that. To where you go through and it's kind of like I'm looking at all the different kind of versions of reality and kind of simulating it all together to figure out like what is actually going to happen with all this information. So like everything that's happened, like I've been able to predict the future almost like perfectly, but not just like because I know the future. It's like I figured out all these things that would happen and then logically deducted that this is what was going to happen because of these things.
It's because you gathered the most relevant pieces of data within a clearly defined frame.
Yes, that's exactly what I did, yeah.
And the thing is, I'm pretty good at predicting the future sometimes. Like if you ask me, and I'm actually a really good person to ask like investment advice and stuff. I know exactly what people should invest in. I just never invest in anything because it seems like a hassle. I gotta get this, and it's a hassle. But like you should invest in NFTs right now. People should invest in NFTs and or put together an NFT platform.
What's an NFT?
NFT is a non-fungible something. But it's basically a cryptocurrency, but instead of being a fungible unit, which is like, in other words, each Bitcoin is interchangeable for any other Bitcoin. It's non-fungible. It's a like collectible. So, for example, Vin Scully made a NFT that he sold at some auction, which is basically it's got a unique identity as a digital object. It's uncounterfeitable because it's blockchain technology, but it's replacing the broken and always counterfeited marketplace of traditional collectibles because it has the number one thing: it can't be counterfeited.
That's pretty neat.
Yeah. So, and a lot of NFTs, the idea of it really starts with if you're playing a game such as like World of Warcraft, and you kill a monster and you get a sword, you don't get to keep that sword. You don't own that sword. It still belongs to the game and the environment.
Yeah, it's data.
Right.
So the new movement in games is I'll have a better game. I'll make my game so that you can take your sword with you when you leave. It belongs to you. It's your property. It's got its own bit chain identity. So anyway, shit with NFTs is popping. There's this thing called Last Dragons. It's like a kind of a Ethereum for NFTs kind of, or something like that. And it's still near its initial offering. Buy into that.
That's neat. Yeah, I'll definitely look into it. I've got it written down so I don't forget. If I don't write stuff down, I'm just thinking too many things, I'll forget it.
Anyway, so the thing is, I'm pretty good at predicting, but I'm also sometimes really bad at predicting. Like with the COVID thing, I was correct about it right off the bat. I was correct in predicting this. The actual fatality rate is going to be at least 10 times lower than they're saying now. Because initially they were saying 4%.
I thought everybody was being nuts.
Just based on the methodology. If you just critique the methodology, if you only test the sickest people, obviously the fatality rate is going to be hugely inflated. Right. And just because, you've got a pile of oily rags and hay, which is what Italy was, just because they made a big fire doesn't mean it was started with a flamethrower. The thing is, but I was very wrong about how the world would react to it. I said, they're not going to cancel March Madness. That's insane. And I said, they're not going to cancel a baseball season.
But due to social media and everything else, it blew up more because of all of the craziness that people were sharing. So the general people that normally don't go through and go crazy on it started going even more nuts because they had a bigger, broader audience that they could shout to.
Yep.
Which then, when they shouted, it made other people shout, which made a cascading flow of shouting.
And then it
people,
went into other social medias as well, like YouTube.
which then made everybody go nuts about it.
Yeah.
Well, basically, everybody operated under an unstated axiomatic frame that there was an affirmative burden to prevent potential harm vectors, which doesn't exist, and it makes it an insane world, you know?
Right.
And everybody's worried about this sort of this liability fixation. Well, if I don't push the most draconian measures and someone dies, won't I be to blame? Well, no, you won't. But people don't like that answer and don't accept that reality, and so
right. Because most people don't think logically; they just think based on their feelings or what they did before, which is some 80-90% of the world.
Yeah. So okay, this distinction here is very gratifying to me because it does seem to test out. Now, it also is a sobering reminder to myself that 8th slot and SI resists being squozen like an unready zit. You got to push a lot on it to make it squeeze out.
You can't remember crap. No. The only reason why I wasn't able to come up with it before was I was trying to come up with some moment to where, like, I forgot what was going to happen or something. And usually I'm pretty planned out. So, like, I don't really have a ton of moments to where, like, I forget something. So, like, if you were, like, it's because I misunderstood the question. If it was, take some experience from, like, last, I don't know, time you remember something on photographs, I would have been able to reproduce it. It was just because I misunderstood the question.
Right. Which is normal also for backslot functions that we're prone to misunderstanding. It's maximal impact. It's like back when I was fully FI polar and not aware of any cognitive functions, people would say, "How are you feeling? You look down." I'm a little hungry. No, I mean emotionally. Oh, I guess I'm sleepy. So
like, I'm content. I'm good.
And the thing is, what one other way that polar difference should express is basically, Kyla, you don't respect people's experience at all or experiences at all. So, like when you described your relationship with taking the dog out to pee, that actually sounded like your straight up like polar SI thing because you're not respecting the dog's experience. The dog, you just think it takes a long time. Whereas, but the thing is, it's actually revelatory of the fact that you are SI somewhat keeping track of experience. You just don't wipe away 6 hours as a detail, you know? And then 6 hours of chatting passed. Wait, that's a detail?
She does that sometimes.
Yeah.
Like, I got so confused because so many darn people on YouTube are like, oh, like Lijo's like, I'm an INTJ. And I'm like, nah, it doesn't seem like it. It seems like you're
like
in something that's definitely not an INTJ. Because, like, I kept getting that and it kind of sort of matched. And I was like, that's just incorrect. So how do you put up with all these people that are going through and doing that, giving out bad info all the time?
Well, look, the thing is this. I have come to respect the fact that I can't type people without actually typing them. I used to think I could type people from the chat, for example. And then I'd chat with somebody for months, assuming I know what they are. And then I'd actually type them, and I'd be wildly off base. I would have been wildly off base. I was like, I was assuming this guy was like an INFJ the whole time. He's an ISFP. Because when you look at people with just their text, it's you only get to see what they want to show you. Now, with the same thing is true, but to a lesser extent, with YouTube stuff. It's much more true for Lijo than it is for me. With me, you don't just get to see what I want to show you. You just get to see everything because I don't feel like I need to be private about anything really. Right? I'm countervaluing TE. In other words, I'm not showing you parts of myself for any purpose other than look at me. Hey, look at me. I want your attention. Don't I make you laugh? Aren't I funny? Whatever. That's the only reason I'm doing it. So that's why it's all haphazard and there's no NI singularity to the thing. And it's a different sort of reason for making YouTube videos than most people have. Most people have some kind of TE justification. I'm going to make money with this, something like that. So I don't know what type Light Joe is, but I used to do type police a lot. I want to, plan to, state intentions of resuming it with probably just starting it over and just doing
Yeah,
everybody.
that was fun to watch. I was watching those because I was getting the same kind of, like, I pulled up a video that she was doing, and like she just kind of went into something, and her dad was like, oh, you shouldn't do this because all these things were happening, and then she just went right into it and then failed miserably. And like I got that, and I'm like, I don't think any INTJ, self-respecting INTJ, would just jump into something that they'd have no clue what was going to happen. And that's what she was clearly saying that she was going to do. And then that's what the dad was like, yeah, you were nuts. That was like the only video I pulled to that she was going through before she was like had her persona going on. And I was like, that does not look like an INTJ. And then I was getting videos from that, and that's where I was testing as. And I was like, I don't do any of those things. And then I was getting really confused based on all that information. So that's where I was like trying to find all the information from everywhere around, and then that gives me really bad data to go on, and then my network that I have in my head gets all jumbled up because of all the bad information I'm gathering.
Right. Okay, so yeah, the thing is, it's INTJs on YouTube aren't particularly common because INTJs don't particularly feel like they're in their natural environment putting themselves out there on display. It's kind of like FE things are reserved for friends and family.
Right.
Just like my authentic feelings are reserved for friends and family. So,
right.
But the reality is, when I did type police, and the thing that is tricky is, it's inherently an expression of something I don't approve of, which is typing people without typing them. If you're going to try, like people try to tell me I'm some other type. Somebody came into a live stream the other night and tried to tell me I was an ESFJ. And what I didn't think at the time, what I should have said, but I didn't at the time think of it, is, oh, are you offering to type me? Because people are very sure about other people's types without ever having typed them, and myself guilty included. Like when I typed policed Marty, that guy was clearly not an INFJ. No sane human being would ever say that Marty was an INFJ. If you know anything about INFJs, you know they don't ramble on wrongly and pointlessly and not very gracefully in the fashion that Marty was doing, okay? And yet, when I say in the type police that you're no INFJ, I have absolutely rocked his world in a way that I didn't intend to, right?
Because people go through and attach to their whatever they type as, whether Davey Boy says it or anybody else says it. Then once they're attached to it, they're just screaming to the world, this is what I am and this is how it is. And it's like, well, we're just trying to help you to figure out like how you could, like when you're talking about the polar functions or when we're talking about what your loop's going to run into, it's like if you know your type well, you can go through and kind of poke at it and technically figure out what you might be going through, and that's how you can use it to help people. And then those people just scream it out to the world and you can't fix it because their identity's attached to it.
Right. And with instrumental NI, which you have absolute NI, but Kyla has instrumental NI, but she's T above N. So if you're T above N, she's got TI as an absolute value. So she's safe. she's safe from NI run amok. NI run amok happens with ESFPs and ENFJs who want their NI to be prioritized, despite the fact that their T won't ever be the thing that validates it. So if you're FI tool and NI fourth, the truth is something that you pick up to use for a specific purpose.
Yeah.
And then when it's no longer useful for that purpose, it doesn't matter that it's still true. You toss it aside and pick up some other statement that's patently false and present it as the truth now, because that's your relationship with it. If you have TI polar, you don't think that any truths are ever non-holistic. In other words, everything that's true is irreducible. And since your FI is telling you what you would like to be, and people are saying, you're not that, you then go to demonstrative 6-slot FE, which is, I'm going to put a lot of energy into convincing you that I'm a type I'm not.
Right.
And when you finally agree with them, then the next day they'll be like, oh, I've got some news. Turns out I was wrong. I'm actually an INTP. Okay.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah. So those things do happen in the typological community, and
I just left the whole community because I just couldn't. Like, I was trying to help people with the same kind of thing. I just got ousted from everything. So I was like, all right, I'm just not going to help you guys anymore.
Well, maybe you will validate something that I've had experience validating with every other INTJ. Do you identify with the statement, everyone's doing everything wrong, and though I rarely say anything, my rage about it broils down deep?
Generally, I find fault in a lot of things all the time. So I think I'd be self-aware enough to say usually I'm pretty darn critical about everybody doing anything.
Okay.
All the time. Not a never-ending cycle.
But you don't express that angrily, probably?
I don't express it angrily. I usually just complain about it to Kyla.
Which is technically a form of anger, yeah.
So I guess I do express it to some extent where I'm just like, why would they do this? Or we had a friend that was like kind of being a dick because I kind of pick up on, or one of my friends actually, I was helping him explain how personality could be used to write descriptions because he's got a business writing descriptions. And then he said something in like a really dick way and then kind of discounted everything I said on a public YouTube video. And then I expressed it angrily. I'm like, why would he even do that? It's not something you should do. Like, you shouldn't just generally go through and be like, oh, say something like, oh, you're one of your best friends goes through and tells you everything about personality that he's been learning for 9 months, and then you just discount it all publicly and throw it out there.
Because you were telling him it's a critical element to doing what he perceives himself as being the expert of, which is writing these things.
He thought he was an ENTP, and I was like, you're nothing like an ENTP. I'm like, from everything I've read about an ENTP, you're nothing like it. And he's like, oh, that was like a gut punch. And I was like trying to explain to him what he was doing wrong with his titles, which is that finding fault thing on YouTube. And I was going through and I'm like, well, if you title these things differently and then be able to broaden your audience out here by using a little bit more generic titles, because his were really complex. And I'm like,
and long.
Then you'll be able to go through and reach more people. Because he was like trying to say something like, okay, because there's this Christmas tree in front of me, I'll use this. It'd be like, oh, his title might be White Christmas Trees Found in Norway on the September 1st in the middle of the Appalachian Mountains with a mountain goat. And I was like, you're not getting any views because nobody can find your video.
Is he an ESTJ?
I was thinking it was more of an FI because he like really got offended that his somewhere along the lines that his information was wrong. And like he didn't want to accept that his information was wrong, kind of like what you were saying about the TI in that slot that you just said. I forgot which one it was, but like he was really upset that his he didn't want to believe his information was wrong, so he went and literally made a video on that how wrong I was, essentially, and then threw it out there.
What were you about to say, Kyla?
I was gonna say something, but I forgot. It was something along the lines of like, what were you talking about? It was
the friend with the long titles.
I was thinking it was more along the lines. I don't think it was the fact that he thought the information was wrong. I think it's because he thought that he felt offended because he sees himself and he's like, oh, I'm really good at doing this and this is what I like is important to me and I'm really awesome and everybody tells me how great I am. And then he like centered himself around that. I don't think it was that he thought the information was wrong. I think it was because he found it was like a personal attack on him.
Right, because
that's why I thought it was like
it threatened how he presented himself.
Right.
Yeah. How he felt he successfully presented competency in a given area.
Right.
You told him how to be actually competent in a given area. Right. And he's like, but this is critical to my identity.
Right.
Yep.
The thing is
that FI?
Well, it's more of it's really an FE thing. The reason why he wanted to make a video about it is an FE thing. Your explanation of it being about his relationship with the information being wrong is also very representative of FE polar. Misunderstanding something that's clearly an FE thing. The fact that he made a video publicly to say that you were wrong meant not only if you had hurt his feelings, he would have come to terms with the fact that he wasn't what he thought he was. Right. Instead, you hurt his pride.
Yeah, essentially, that's where I hit him.
Yeah.
I didn't know I hit him there. I was just trying to give him the correct information, and then he didn't like the correct information.
That's being an INTJ, giving people advice, being helpful, and then realizing that you've hurt their feelings because
that happens.
They don't want to actually. They don't want to actually achieve the goal they told you.
Yeah.
They want to already have achieved it.
Right.
They want to feel like they're doing something to achieve it and that they don't need help from anybody else because they know what they're doing.
So usually everybody goes through and that's where you're like, well, that's where I said I can be self-aware enough to say that I do find fault in a grand majority of everything because I try to help people. And then usually my help, if somebody would take it, ends up being really well. But then I offend everybody by going through all the time, because they think I'm super critical all the time. And I'm like, well, I'm not meaning to be critical. It's more like I'm trying to help you solve this problem because I see this tiny amount of fault here and you could do this thing and it changed that and a domino effect out because that's just how I see the world. Yeah. And then it just, people don't usually like it.
Well, I mean, the text.
I'm willing to be
classic
wrong
example.
on things.
The classic example is this: you go to an INTJ and you've got the bright enthusiasm of youth, and you say, "I am so excited! I'm trying out for the voice. I'm gonna make it. I'm gonna be a singer." And the INTJ goes, "Oh, that's just great! I'm really excited for you." Of course, your pitch problems will probably get in the way, so why don't I recommend this vocal coach to you?
Right. Yeah. Or I'd be like, well, I mean, I don't know if you should be a singer because 99.5%
pitch problems?
of singers.
I don't have any pitch problems.
You're right.
Yeah.
Or 99.5% of singers usually end up failing, so if you want to actually make a career, you should probably pick something different. Is usually would be my general response. But I learned that was an issue, so I read a whole bunch of psychology books to try to solve that.
Here's what you do. Oh my God. You have to follow your dream. You are so talented, and I believe in you and your passion more than anything
impossible.
in the world.
I can say that sarcastically, probably, real quick, but actually...
You just kind of say, yeah, you can do it. I believe in you. You got it. Just go ahead and send me a recording. And then don't tell me.
You just say this. You go, girl. Regardless of their gender. You go, girl.
That's one of the go-to ones. Yeah. You go, girl.
Hey.
Or the follow your truth.
Yeah, follow your truth. Or, hey, you do you.
Yeah, I can't handle that really
well.
Oh,
that's great.
I can logically, I have to logically piece together what could probably be going wrong, and I'm usually reading underlying on probably what's going to happen because from all the information I have in my head, comparing with everything else. So I'm
just speaking to express myself, okay?
Oh my God.
I'm not saying anything. I'm just expressing myself right now.
I can't handle it.
Now it's your turn. You express something meaningless about something.
I try to control my body language around those kind of people and try to logically go through and piece together that they have those kind of emotions, but it's very hard.
Hey, Peter, listen. Everything happens for a reason.
Oh my God, yeah, that's cool.
Everything happens for a reason.
It's fate. It's
just fate. Yeah, it's just fate.
Yeah.
It doesn't work out well with me. I'm like, no, it's not fate. You could go through and do this. You're choosing not to.
Well, life's a mystery.
Yeah.
No. It's about the journey.
It's all about the journey.
Yeah.
The intention's what matters.
Yeah.
That makes sense. That makes perfect sense. So that's where I've been confused. I was like, well, I don't relate anything with any of these sensor people, and I'm like, I know I'm technically logically intuitive based off the information I gathered. I just wasn't sure which. But with talking to you helped me realize the branching out versus the narrowing down, because that's what everybody said, and I was like, well, I always narrow down.
Like, I think I branch, but then it narrows.
Well, it's not unconscious. It's not like I see the whole thing, but that's where it's weird. But I guess that could just be all the fake ones.
It's also, look, any intuition dom is going to be fairly strong in both intuitions and is going to value highly both intuitions. So
yeah, that makes sense.
It's just that because you decide to specialize in one side of the coin, the other side of the coin is always facing away from you, but it's necessarily there for you to do your work off of, and you have a robust relationship with it. The thing is, I'd point out, if somebody were to watch this video and these videos, they might say, it would seem to me, based on what we've watched here, that he's the extrovert and she's the introvert.
Right.
So what I would like you guys to talk about a little bit is, the extent to which this engagement between you two and me is typical or atypical of how you two operate as a couple.
So, let's see. I've stereotypically my entire life, I've been extremely extroverted to where I always had friends around me all the time. I would always go through and I'd have, I don't know, 5, 10, 15 people. I'd always in high school, I had a group of people around me. Because I'd always be doing something differently. And so I'd have a group of 10 or 15 people. And I made a hacky sack group and I talked with the other people over in the tech club or something like that. And I'd have a group over there and I'd play poker in the back with the people over there when I was skipping class. Or when I was skipping class, I would go through and I'd have my friends that I'd take to the beach. And then at another time, it didn't end up well for me. But I had my car parked in the back and I would sell my car essentially for trips that people could take. And they would go through and be able to take trips with my car and they'd pay me $20 or $30 in high school, and they do that. And then I had the donut business that I had running on too as well.
So a long-winded way of saying he was.
I've been fairly really extroverted most of my life. It was just until I ran into a huge money problem, then that's when, or the homeless problem, that's when I became a lot more reserved. But otherwise, I've been fairly extroverted. And then her growing up was actually
Kyla, go.
Yeah, versus for me growing up, I was very introverted and I would consider myself more reserved and shy up until around the end of middle school, and then in high school, then I became very, very extroverted, and that's when I was doing all of the cheerleading and the softball and all those kinds of things. But before then, I was a lot more introverted. I had a little bit group of friends, and then I would go and I'd read fiction books, or I'd be reading in I'd pick a tree or something, and I'd be going and reading in that. So I would consider myself a lot more introverted in my earlier years up until probably I was saying around middle schoolish age, and then I became a lot more socially extroverted because I was I'm not really in with the cool kids, and I'm not really having that. So then I went and I essentially worked my way into the popular kids, and I'm oh, you know, I don't really like these people. I don't think I'm not gonna really hang out with them anymore. And then I went back to my old friends that I had, and then I went and did all of the cheerleading and the softball and all of the clubs and everything in high school. So I became more extroverted later on.
Did you end up dropping out of college or something?
I got 3 associate's degrees in a year, and then I did end up dropping out of college, and then I was well, I'm not going to be a doctor anymore, so there's no need for me to continue going down this path. It's pointless.
I dropped out.
It is an incredible waste of money.
Yeah.
That's where I dropped out of college, because I figured out how much of a waste of money it is and how useless it was. I could just gain all the skills myself without having to go through and learn that way. And this was back in 2012, 2013. Before all of the cool people were doing it.
Right. Well, when I went to college, I didn't think anything really. I just, it's it's weird. It's hard for people who are younger to understand how different it was before the internet.
Yeah, the internet makes it to where you can actually do a ton. This wasn't even available.
The internet was. I started college in 1989. I finished college in 1994. So it took me 5 years. But in 1994, there was some internet, email and stuff like that. But 1990, there basically wasn't any. And the key thing is, if you grow up in an environment where all of your sort of notions about identity have to be gleaned from your immediate environment and the people around you, and you're an intuitive, and you don't have any internet, you really come to the conclusion that there's something terribly wrong with you, because you're very different than everybody else.
Right.
Yeah.
And you're not quite sure why. And I didn't even know anything about MBTI until I was 30 years old. So it's for mapping types that care a lot about labels, frames. I liked how she NI-tooled your NE valuing NI, which she called rambling or something. You were making sure I had all the details necessary to fully understand.
Yeah, I just kind of was shutting you.
Yeah, she shuts me.
I was basically, this is the gist of what he's saying.
Yeah.
And you're probably also aware that he's violating some FE social moray, because he's supposed to give you your turn. And that might be perceived as awkward, and so you're going to intervene on his behalf. It's great. It's great 7th and 8th slot cooperation.
Yeah, my brain goes through and it's like taking in. It's like, well, if I let Kyla talk, then she won't be able to give the right information for you to get. And then if you don't have the right information, that's going to end up wrong. So where my brain's like always on overdrive.
Well, you don't trust her to know on the fly. You need to know in advance. But she knows on the fly. It's her tool function.
Probably, yeah. It makes sense. Yeah, I 100% respected her for that before we got together.
It's the case that she's an interface type. Interface types, their frame of reference is, I will know as I get my hands dirty.
Yeah, that's exactly what she does. Yeah, 100%.
And a knowledge type like you says, I will know in full before I get my hands dirty.
Right. Like, I'll know the whole process. I'll know everything else. And then I'll go through and I'll do it once I understand it fully.
And I say you can figure it out.
And an action type like me will be like, how did I get so dirty?
That makes sense, yeah. I've always observed first. And then that's where every single business that I have run, it's never failed. Like, I always ended up making a lot of money. Like, I sold $8 million on Amazon, and, like, everything I did, like, has always succeeded. Like, my biggest problem is, like, I'm too kind to people, and then that gets me, like, an issue. Which is, I guess, that FE problem.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're susceptible to appeals to your 3rd slot FI. 3rd slot FI being selfish and an absolute value. You feel paid off when you care for people. Or maybe do harm prevention, I guess. I don't feel very good at talking about FI, but one of the things that's definitely part of FI is harm prevention. So you feel good when you make sure Kyla's safe as you're doing activity.
Yeah, I'll go through and I'll like kill everything that I have in favor of keeping Kyla safe.
And it's very gratifying to you to successfully care for that for which you love or for whom you love.
Not at the cost of myself, usually. If it causes me pain at the same time, I'm usually upset.
If it causes you emotional pain, then you're not caring for somebody you love. You are doing something. You are making some sort of decision. You're sacrificing something important to yourself, right? So one might think of FI as its ultimate goal is to avoid later regret.
Right. I can sympathize with that, yeah.
And so that makes you susceptible to appeals to your humanity because you concern yourself that you might later regret having been inadequately moral or something.
Right. Like I lost like $750,000 with my last abusive relationship because she went and always appealed to that and was like, oh, we need to give this money to these homeless people or these people who are on drugs or these people over here or that or that or this. So all my money was always going towards somebody else. And I was like, oh.
One second. Let me take this call real quick. Hello?
Hey, Eric.
Hey, who's this?
Just sent you the file that has the bass recorded on it.
Oh, okay, cool. Thanks. I'll check it out.
So check your email.
Okay, we'll do.
Try to do whatever you will with it. I tried to get the cleanest recording with my limited equipment.
All right, fantastic. Thank you. I'm in the middle of a session, so I'm going to cut this conversation short, but I'll check out that email and I'll get back to you about it, okay?
All right. Get to it. Sorry.
All right, bye. Well, that's cool. Okay, I didn't know who it was, and I'm always worried that maybe I've forgotten something I was supposed to be doing right now. It's like a fundamental underlying concern I have all the time. So when I get a phone call,
is that like an SI 4th slot thing, an SI repressed?
SI 4th slot. It's because I'm aware that it's conscious enough that I know I'm not paying enough attention to keeping track of everything I should be keeping track of. Now, Google Calendar is proved to be, very reliable and good at making noises to remind me.
Yeah.
But I still don't seem to trust it. I still expect myself to remember everything anyway because I'm an SI front stack type. But I'm at the wrong end of the teeter-totter down here. My NE's up here, and my SI's down here. And so the way that would actually link to you guys with your 4th slot is, it's like, my theory is that you take as an absolute value the opposite half of your dominant function from your 4th. So what that would mean is, because Peter has NI first, that he would find an absolute value of SE in real time, which is experiencing things like going jogging or just anything that's like physical now,
Yeah.
but that he wouldn't like having to follow through so much. That
No.
to the extent that NI truths constrain him too much with the TE in terms of follow through as to invalidate against his fifth slot NE. In other words, that it prevents him from embracing a new brilliant idea he has or something. Then he's gonna favor the capacity to embrace a new brilliant idea over the requirements of follow through. In other words, he's going to be resistant. He's going to be resistant to locking himself into a given TE frame too much because it's instrumental.
Right. That's exactly what I do 100% of the time. I'll know exactly what I need to do. I've done all the math. I'll have everything all put together. And I'm like, if I just do, like, I've made other people millions of dollars, but then if I go through and I don't do it myself because of exactly what you said.
Okay, now, Kyla, because you TE first, that means it's the opposite with FI in you. So what matters to you is that your boundaries and stuff be respected across time or overall. But you're willing to put up with being made to feel bad in the moment is not that big of a deal to you. Like, in other words, whether or not you feel good or bad right now is purely an instrumental consideration. Whether or not your boundaries are respected or some other kind of expression of cross-time FI. And again, I'm not great at talking about FI, but that would be...
FI people are scary.
That would be where your absolute value is. So, in other words, to the extent that we express FI as how you feel in the moment, to you, that's not rewarding or meaningful. But to the extent that we express FI as avoiding regret, I guess, then that's more meaningful to you.
Yeah, that's accurate. Yeah, because for me, it's more along the lines of it's more, I guess, about the long, like you were saying, with it being, you don't care really how you feel in the moment. That's kind of how it is. Like, if something like offends me, I care about more like the longevity of the feeling, more than like feeling bad in the moment, I guess. And it is more like meaningful for me to go through and like talk about how like what you were saying with how FI goes and is about like, oh, will you regret this eventually later on down the line? That I think that's pretty much like how I would use it. I guess that's what I'd say. Yeah.
And you probably don't particularly enjoy FI that requires action of you, such as harm prevention. So you don't particularly want to be the one who has to remember to, close the back gate and who has to make sure the dog gets fed on time. Because, it's like, oh shit, have I fed the dog in the last 3 days?
Yeah, that's me. Yeah, for sure. Then he's taking care of. He's like, oh, I have to do this. I'm like, sorry.
All right. So Rachel's countervalued FI is like you, Kyla, but she does remember. So it's just pure torture. It's like she feels obligation to every creature. It's like there's these peacocks that come around. There's one peacock that we regularly feed named Peter. But then some other peacocks periodically come around and think, hey, I want to get in on this. And she has this desperate battle with herself. Like, I must not feed them because once I set the expectation that they can get food from me, then I'm obligated to continue to feed them.
That's really funny.
Yeah.
And she worries about the cat. Like, for example, sometimes I'll leave the cat. The cat will be in here, in this room, or the inside room, or outside. Sometimes she'll get in a room and we'll be in the other room. I'll forget about, like, where the cat is. Rachel will always be like, oh, did we leave the cat locked in the other room?
That's funny.
That's weird. That's like the opposite of me.
So that's been really helpful. That kind of solved the whole puzzle now. I really appreciate that because I've just been going around in circles for 9 months over and over and over again.
Perpetually.
Over and over and over again. I'm like, oh, I got it down. No, I don't. I got it down. No, I don't.
It's funny is that everything you typed is INTJ too. On literally every single thing, he was like, INTJ, 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 INTJ. He's like, but maybe I'm an ENTP.
Well,
I was like, they say ENTPs never get their type right, and then because they're always discounting truth, and that's what I'm doing all the time. So I'm like, oh, I've discounted this, I've discounted that, I've discounted this, I've discounted that. It could be this, it could be that, it could be this, it could be that.
You're just discounting other people's truths.
Yeah, sorta. Like, it's more like I'm taking in so many truths from so many things. Like, I'm getting so much information all over the place that it's like really hard to discern the difference between them all. So I'm trying to find that thread in between.
I guess that's what I'm saying is you're discounting particularist expression of truth. And you're recognizing that if you encounter too many different particularist expressions of the same truth, it muddies it beyond all recognition. Now,
Yeah, more or less. Yeah, more or less.
it's certainly the case with typology. Now, the key to solving that is to just simply actually require for people to make and sustain a good set of justifications.
Right. Because everybody's got their own different justifications that are so completely wrong. So I try to go to the original source of Carl Jung eventually. That's what I did and read all the darn things there. And it's like, well, now everybody's saying completely different things in comparison to the source material. And if we pop off from there, now it's just branching out further and further down. I'm like, oh, this is nuts. Well, so then, yeah, that's exactly it. It muddies it.
And at the end of the day, what we have to remember is what we're doing is mapping the different ways that people can potentially pay attention, frame experience, whatever. So, people can frame experience either by figuring out the single best way or by trying to guess as many possible different ways so they can see lots of different ones and then maybe try to figure out the best way. Or they can try to know all the ways they've done before, or they can, there's a finite number of angles. And cognitive functions basically just explain how people habitually take some of those angles and habitually don't take some other angles accordingly.
Right.
So, yeah. So the same reason why you said, basically to sum up what you're saying here is meh. The same reason you're able to do that, consistently do that and do it well, is the same reason why you can't remember any details. Because your tool function is to always take what's existent rather than recalled and coalesce it down into the most effective, efficient, singular mapping object you can, because that's the kind of thing you retain. You retain all the low resolution data, mapping objects, and none of the high resolution data, like how that soup tasted.
Yeah.
That's okay.
There's a little FE Polar there too. For people who cared, they might. For people who are heavily FE, they would critique you for
patting you on the head.
For patting her on the head.
Oh.
Yeah, because they'd see that as what, like
condescending.
Condescending. Yeah.
Yeah.
It doesn't cross my mind.
I'm just like,
you're only supposed to do that during sex.
It doesn't even cross my mind at all. So
That's FE Polar for you. Okay, I'm going to stop this video. I will share it with you guys privately pending your go-ahead on any publishing if you want to publish. Unless
go ahead. If you want to publish it, do it. If it helps people, it helps people. You have full permission.
Fantastic. I will definitely publish. You will see the first one go up today and the second one go up tomorrow.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thanks a lot.